Good evening. My name is Rose Blaze, and I am the author of Truthingdom, a two-part series, The Conception and the Revelation. I'm also the author of Shadow Shadow. Welcome to the live book show this evening. I would like to introduce my guest panelist, Prolific. Good evening, Prolific. How are you?
Good evening. Thank you for having me this evening.
Wonderful. And I would now like to introduce our main speaker this evening, Omowale. Good evening to you.
Good evening to you, and thank you so much for having me here with you in your program.
Wonderful. It's a pleasure to have you. Is the author of Pan-Africanism, From Program to Philosophy and Outlook to Liberation.
Good evening, Olawame. Lovely to meet you this evening. I was just wondering, where did you get your name from and what does it mean?
Oh, right. That's an interesting question. I mean, the name Omowale, well, there's Omo and there's Wale. In the Yoruba language, Omo means child.
Wow.
Okay.
And Wale means to come in or to return. So when I went to Yoruba lands over 30 years ago, I was given the name Omo Wale, the child who has returned to Africa. So that's where my first name comes from. I'm particularly proud of that name. They gave Malcolm X the same name when he went to Yoruba land.
Wow.
So I'm very grateful for the choice of name that was made on my behalf. Rupert Emru comes out of respect for my parents. At birth, they gave me the name Rupert. And in changing my name, I did not want to disrespect my parents. So I kept Rupert Emru as the family name.
Okay.
And Rupert Emru is an ancient book. It's an ancient Kemetic book. Kemet being ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
Right.
And it means the book of the coming forth by day. This is the book which is the precursor to many of the holy books that we have now. So you can find the origins of the Bible, for instance, in the Patemru. You can find the origins of the Torah in the Patemru. You can find the origins of a range of holy books, basically, in the Patemru. You know? And so I've adopted this. When I learned that Rupert had this meaning, it literally means the book.
Wow.
Yeah? When I learned that it had that meaning, and it had an African meaning to that, it allowed me to take that and adopt it as my family name.
Yes.
And in that way, I continued to pay respect to my parents, who named me in the best way they knew how.
Thank you for that introduction. So moving on to the preamble at the beginning of the book, I'm telling you, it was a really intense read from cover to cover. So can you start by telling us what Pan-Africanism is?
Right, okay. In simple terms,
In simple terms.
Pan-Africanism is really three things. It is the unification, the coming together as one of Africa and her people. So it's the unification of Africa and her people. It is the liberation of Africa. We are in a position at the moment where Africa is actually controlled from outside. Other people control Africa, and African people do not control it. So one of the tasks that we've got to do is we've got to liberate Africa. So part one is the unification of Africa. Part two is the liberation of Africa. And part three is the creation of a just social system. In other words, we don't just want to replace a bad social system with another bad social system. We want to replace the bad social system that we have in Africa with a just social system. And that just social system is called scientific socialism. So a quick definition of Pan-Africanism is the unification and liberation of Africa under scientific socialism.
Wow, wow. That, I understood that. Okay, so while I was reading the preamble, I'd read, unification of Africa as one intercontinental state, preliminary governed by women. I found that a really interesting entry. So could you elaborate on why that's the case, please?
Yes. It's to do with matriarchal and patriarchal principles. I'm going to have to take a step back to explain this.
Right, okay, that's fine.
So let's look for matriarchal and patriarchal principles on Earth,
Right.
okay, by examining nature. And if you can imagine that the rain falls to the earth,
Right.
it goes into the earth, it nourishes the earth, and then out of the earth comes life,
Yes.
plants, flora and fauna, and that is the
Procreation,
sustenance
yeah.
of life of different forms on earth.
Yeah.
You see, the rain which falls from the sky is the masculine principle. Yeah? The earth operates on the feminine principle. Everything relies on the feminine
Okay.
principle. And so if we translate that into human beings now, where the masculine and feminine principles may be easier to decipher. The man comes with special water. He gives that special water to the woman. When the woman receives that special water, life begins in the woman,
Right.
in the womb of the
Right.
woman. And out of the woman comes life. You see, the woman is the earth,
Yes.
the feminine principle. The man is the water, the masculine principle. And so if we understand these principles, and these principles run through absolutely everything, everything on earth, these principles run through them if we can do the correct analysis to find out what is the masculine principle and what is the feminine principle.
Okay.
Well, without going into detail, the state
Right.
is masculine. It operates on the masculine principle.
Right.
The state is actually the strongest instrument of violence in any nation. Now, there isn't time necessarily for me to go into a full explanation of that, but in books that I've written, I give an explanation of that. And in Pan-Africanism from Program to
Yes,
Philosophy,
yes.
there is an explanation
Okay.
of that in there. So the state is violence. The masculine, and that operates on the basis of the masculine principle. If you want the state to operate in a way that's just, if you make men, the masculine principle, operate the masculine state, you're adding violence to violence.
Right. Right. Yes. You need the balance.
If you have women in charge of the state, women do not operate on that violent
In nurture.
left. Exactly. You see, women are the givers of life.
Right.
Women sometimes lose their lives in order to give life. So women understand the value of life in a way that a man cannot.
Right.
We are not capable of understanding the value of life in the way that women are capable of understanding the value of life. This is why we're quick to fold up our fists and fight. Yeah? This is why we're quick to hold weapons and attack other people when we're upset, etc. But women will usually take a step back. They'll do lots of things before. If you get them violent, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it takes a lot to
Yes.
get them to that point. Now, in order for the masculine state, and I'm talking masculine principle of the state, to be properly managed in a way that is not just going to wantonly kill people, because the state has that power, it can kill.
Yeah.
Yeah. By tranquilizing it to some extent with the feminine principle, with women being in charge, women will contain that violence.
Yes.
Women will not be quick to use the violence of the state against people. And so in that way, we are protecting the people from the violence
And you
of
can
the
see
state.
the clear roles between the feminine and the masculine within our community now, and how that can be executed. So thank you for explaining that. Okay, so following the preamble, we come to the vision. And just to say to our listeners today that we're going to talk about the vision and we're going to talk about the objectives of the Pan-Africanist, because this book is a wonderful, wonderful piece, but it's very, very in depth. So what we're going to try to do is summarize. So if we can just focus on the vision and the objective today, just to give our readers a really good understanding, like, just a good foundation as to move as to what we do moving forward. So let's start with the vision. Can you talk us through the vision of Pan-Africanism?
Okay, what I'll do is I'll try to present the framework
Okay.
of the vision, and if you want to ask detailed questions within that, then I'm happy
Perfect.
to go with that.
Thank you.
The vision is composed in 4 parts, and it's composed in 4 parts because culture can be shown to be composed of 4 parts. The base of culture, the base of the vision, is economics.
Right.
What is economics? Economics is the relationship between people and nature. As we interact with nature, we create things. We plant food, for instance, and we create. And that process of creating, which is called production in economics, is at the heart of economics. Economics is the relationship between people and nature at its simplest level.
Right.
The next level up is politics. What is politics? Politics is the relationship between people. So we are speaking here,
Yes.
the 3 of us. This is politics. This is micro politics, small level politics. But there's also macro politics. And the macro politics is the governance of nations, international relations, etc., etc. Yeah. So the next level of culture and of the vision is the politics.
Right.
Now, as you move above politics, you come to the next level, which is ideology.
Right.
What is ideology? Ideology is the quality of the political relationship. It is the type of political relationship. So politics is the relationship between people. But the relationship between people can be one which is based on good principles or one which is based on bad principles. We can treat people well, we can treat people badly. Yeah? And your ideology is the manifestation of how you treat other people. This is what ideology is in its absolute essence, without all the highfalutin academic stuff that they usually surround it in. Yeah? So it's the quality of the relationship, how we treat our fellow human beings. That is the essence of ideology.
Right.
And then the 4th and final level is the philosophical level. Now the philosophical level gets so high that many of us don't even think about it. We're sort of carrying out our philosophy without even having thought about it. And you'll notice that the people that they train in this country to become leaders of this nation, that they always get them to study politics. So if you go to the people that go through Eton and those kinds of places, they're always into the
Become
not just
good
the
spin
politics,
doctors.
but the philosophy becomes
Yes.
vital, because to
Yes.
understand what is happening
Yes.
at that level allows you a vision of the world that most people just don't have, because they haven't thought about it. It's nothing to do with intelligence. It's just that most people haven't thought about it, and so because we haven't thought about it, it's all a bit of a mystery, and we're just carrying on. Yeah. But what is philosophy? Philosophy comes from its economic base. The economic base is the relationship between people and nature, and philosophy is the quality of the relationship between people and nature. How do we treat nature? Do we treat nature with respect? On the one hand, do we treat nature with disrespect on the other? In practical terms, do we have motor cars that fumigate, that
Yeah,
pollute
the atmosphere.
pollute the air? Yeah? Do we do things to poison the earth? Do we do things to poison the sea? That's one type of philosophy. Yeah? But another type of philosophy says, let's try to live in harmony with the earth.
Yes.
Let us do things that will actually enhance nature and make the environment that we're in a better place to live. So your philosophy is the quality of your relationship with nature. Our philosophy is the quality of our relationship with nature. So there are 4 levels that the vision operates on, 4 levels to culture in that sense. At the base you've got the economics, at the next level up you've got the politics, the next level up you've got the ideology, the next level up you've got the philosophy.
Wow.
And that is the framework,
yeah.
within which the vision is created.
Yes. Wonderful. Thank you for that. That was really clearly explained. And so the reader will have a good understanding of what that is. Okay, so let's now talk about the objectives. Okay. I've read in the book that Pan-Africanism is an objective. So it's about eradicating exploitation.
Yeah.
It's about life improvement and happiness.
Yeah.
But then that's broken down, isn't it? Even more so.
Yeah.
And is it okay if I sort of go through the objectives and then you expound on each one?
Yes.
Okay, so the first Pan-African objective as a grouping is unity. And so you speak about organization. Could you elaborate a bit, please?
Yes, yes. Well, if we look at our history as African people, many of us don't even know that we're African. And we've gone through, well, the denial is part of not even knowing that we're African, and the denial is kind of the worst state of not knowing. It's one thing not to know, it's another thing, it's another level of ignorance without being disrespectful. I'm not using the term ignorance in a disrespectful way here. Yeah. It's another level of ignorance to then deny that we're Africans. But we must understand how we got there. We didn't get there by accident. You know, wicked people came to Africa. And they stole African people. And they took African people away from Africa to the Americas in particular. And then what they did is they said to some of them, well, you lot are Jamaican, you lot are Dominican, you lot are St. Lucian, you lot are St. Kittian, etc. You lot are Bajan. You know, they gave us all different names.
And do you know where that really exposes itself? Because what I've been watching is Ancestry.com, prolific. And what they're saying on there is, when it comes back, they'll be telling you, you're from this part of Africa. You know, you deem yourself a Caribbean person, you deem yourself an African American. And then when Ancestry.com comes back and it says, no, actually, you're from West Congo, a lot of people will be like, what? Because they can't identify with that, which is exactly what you're saying. They're so far removed, they can't then identify. But actually...
that's crazy to me, because, I mean, we all know that, you know, everyone's genes, whether you be black, white, whatever, all lead back to Africa. So that's insane.
Yeah, but people actually are like, what? You know, and they don't identify and they can't, and the realization hits them at that point. So it's just an interesting observation. Sorry, do continue.
Yeah, but you see, we've been programmed to respond in the way that you've just described. We've actually been programmed to respond in that way. So they would do things, for instance, if you stand, for argument's sake, on the island of Dominica, on the south coast of Dominica, and you look, you'll see an island called Martinique.
Yes, you can see.
If you stand on the north coast of Dominica, you'll see an island called Marie-Galante, and you'll even see further, you'll see another island called Guadeloupe.
That's right, yes.
If you stand on the south coast of Martinique, you'll see an island called St. Lucia. Yeah, if you stand on the south coast of St. Lucia, you'll see an island called St. Vincent, and so on. Then the Grenadines, Grenada, all the way down to Trinidad. You can stand on the islands and you can see the others. You can stand on Trinidad and you can see Venezuela. So, you know, one of the methods that they had to prevent us from trying to swim to get away, because we didn't really know what was over there. Yeah, but just to try and get away was to tell us that if you go over there, that lot over there will eat you. Yeah,
Wow.
to create scare
Ignorance,
stories.
yeah, ignorance.
And so now you have, the legacy today where you've got people from one island sometimes don't even want to relate to people
This
from
is,
another island.
There's more
Yeah?
division.
Exactly. So this is what's happened in the diaspora.
Yeah.
Those of us who were taken out of Africa. But then in Africa itself,
Yeah, so
what
many
they did,
divisions and civil war, isn't there?
they drew all lines
Yeah.
all over the African continent. There's something called the Berlin Conference. There isn't time
Yes.
for me to go into
Yeah.
it
Yes.
today.
I know what you mean.
We'll be
Yeah.
discussing that shortly in your next book, The Battlefront.
Yes,
We'll be
yes,
discussing that.
yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And they drew lines all over Africa, put strange names on the African map, and now people are going around thinking that they're Ghanaian
Yeah.
or Nigerian.
Yeah.
Or whatever name is attached to it now, from Botswana or Angola,
By the
etc., etc.
imperialists, isn't it? Who
Yeah.
divided
And they took
absolutely.
a piece,
That's
that
right.
gave pieces each, and
That's right. That's right. And just to keep you in line with and the objectives here, unity. I'll just read them out briefly so you can break them up however you like. So, in relation to unity as a subtitle, we have organization, structures, strategies, tactics, and plans. So, moving forward to, you just spoke about structures, I presume, in terms of, splitting and dividing. So, let's talk about strategies under the title of unity.
Yeah. So we have been divided.
Yes.
So the essence of our strategy must be to bring us back together again.
Right.
The fundamental part of our strategy in the motherland has got to be the removal
Yeah.
of the borders that were created by people who are alien to Africa. The borders have got nothing to do with us. We didn't create them. Yeah, other people created them for their purposes. We must remove them because unity is our purpose. And so our strategy at its base, our political strategy
Yes.
at its base, is about removing those borders,
Unification.
and not just removing them, but creating a unified superstate
Yes.
in Africa.
In Africa.
And when we create a unified superstate in Africa, we will have a population in Africa of 1.3 billion
isn't it? Yeah.
people.
Wow.
Yeah, it will be one of the largest populations in the world. We will be sitting on top of the richest land
Yes.
in the world. Africa is by far,
Amen.
by
Yes.
far. I can't even.
Yes.
There isn't time for me to
yeah.
explain how rich Africa is in comparison
We'll have to come
the
back.
rest of the world. We'll make time another time if you
Yes,
have
no,
me back.
definitely.
Yeah?
So, because you're now going into tactics
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
plans. So, talk to us a bit about the plans.
Yeah, yeah.
In terms of unity, what's the planning? Is the planning about reunification?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
okay,
The essence
right.
is that we must reunify. But the problem is that we've been divided, and a group of us have been given privilege. So there are a group of people who are presidents of these little, what I call jigsaw puzzle states, which we so far have not been able to put together. A bit like Humpty Dumpty, couldn't put the pieces back together again.
Yeah.
And these people are an obstacle. Them and their entourages are an obstacle to us coming back together again because they have all the trappings of office. Who wants to give
ego.
up being the president?
Yeah.
Who wants to give up having a large bank account?
Civil wars have been rife through Africa, right?
Yeah,
because that's the thing, isn't
absolutely.
it? If it unifies, then who's going to lead?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
true.
Who's going to be chosen to lead?
Yeah.
And none of them are going to want that. Rather than looking at what's beneficial for everyone as a whole,
Yes.
they're thinking about themselves, and that's what the
Absolutely.
problem is.
Yeah.
Even in today's society, people are always thinking about themselves and how they're going to benefit rather than everyone,
And as a superpower, how does the world see Africa? Because, as you were saying, they are so rich in terms of resources, minerals, everything. Do you know what I mean? They're going to be scary. Okay.
But just working with that,
Yeah, okay.
that point that you've just put there,
Okay.
how does the world see Africa? Well, here we have an example. Gambia
Yeah.
in West Africa. I don't know off the top of my head what the population of Gambia is, but it will not be more than 5 million. I doubt very much that it will be more than 5 million people.
Still a lot of people.
Can you imagine the Gambian president in negotiation with the Chinese president? The Chinese president, who has a large landmass and 1.3 billion people,
Yes.
goes into negotiation with a little patch of Africa, with only 5 million people. Now, how can they have any meaningful negotiation? It's a bit
About
like
what?
it's a bit.
Just for the
No,
reader,
but it
please
is though,
expound.
isn't it though?
Expound.
Because of the land. They know how nourished
Fertile.
and fertile the land is.
Yeah.
And right now, apparently, there's a lot of the land that was desert that is now starting to become green again.
Yes,
And if you think about China and everything, it's finished. You know,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
full
it's
of pollution,
overpopulated, isn't it?
overpopulated.
Yeah.
So they want
Yeah.
African soul. And sorry to for me personally, when you said, you know, how does the world see Africa? I mean, there's the way that the general public see Africa is in what they're shown by the fake media, but then there's, you know, the truth.
Yes.
And the world actually, those people that are in power, they know that Africa
course they
is
know.
of value. That's how they see it. They see it as a threat. That is exactly it. Which is why obviously they're trying to keep everyone separate.
And now you speak of the battlefront, which is Omawale's second book, defining and knowing who the enemy is. Yeah, so you're touching on it here. So Omawale, can I come back?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
certainly,
Okay. So the second of the objectives is the liberation. I'm going to read the list so that you can structure it in your own mind and tell, you know, so you can let the reader know and break it down nicely. Okay, so we have the liberation. This is about struggle, education, humanism, propaganda, mobilization, and demonstration. So would you like to give us a breakdown, please?
Yes, yes. Well, let me start with the most important principle, which is humanism. Humanism and exploitation are opposite principles.
Right, okay.
The essence of humanism, but let me start with the enemies one first. The essence of exploitation is that profits are more important than people.
Of course.
Yeah? That property is more important than people. That money
Yes.
is more important than people. If I operate on the principle of exploitation, then I'm happy for you to die in order for me to make millions of pounds. I'm sorry to put it so bluntly.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
capitalist.
that's how
That's
it is,
capitalist state for you. Yep.
Yeah, that's the essence. That's
Yep,
the central
privatisation.
principle of
Yep.
capitalism. Yeah? The opposite to that is humanism.
Yes.
Humanism is that people are more important than money.
Yeah.
People are more important than profit.
It's about socialism coming together, isn't it?
That's right. You know, people are more important than property, etc.
Of course.
Yeah, and this is the central principle of socialism, as you've correctly identified. So the essence of humanism is that we treat each human being with respect
Yes.
for no reason other than the fact that they're a human being. You don't need anything else. You just need to be a human being
And that's part of
to
the mantra.
command
Sorry.
automatic respect.
Yes.
Yeah, and so this is the essence of what drives us towards, towards a better future.
Yeah. Your
And
vision says so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And this is the essence of what we're doing in order. In fact, this is the essence of what it is that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Human relations, that we treat each other with respect purely on the basis that we're human beings. That a disabled person is treated with respect because they're a human being. They don't need anything more. That a woman is treated with respect for no other reason than she's a human being. Then an African person is treated with respect for no reason other than the fact that they're a human being. You don't need anything more.
No.
You just need to know that they're human beings, and you know that they command the utmost respect. Now, in African culture, and we see it in African culture, even in the Caribbean, we still maintain this. If you go into an African home, the pot will come out.
Yeah.
Because it's like they're obliged to feed you. You must be fed. Yeah. Because somebody important has just arrived in the house.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are some people that still cook this big pot, and they can't eat it all. They're going to throw most of it away just in case somebody comes in. This is part of our African tradition.
Yes.
This is, you are so important
Yes.
that I must honor you when you come into my house. You must be fed when you come into my house. This is what we're trying to restore.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Okay. So I'm going to read a bit of the preamble, which is talking about the vision of Ukumbuzi,
Yeah.
which I'll ask you to define
Yes.
directly after I read this. Basically, the vision of Ukumbuzi is the intent to create a self-sufficient, resolute nation able to complete and stand as in oneness in accordance to their own beliefs and statutes and in relation to other nations of the world. But there was also the talk of acknowledging each one as one, but within the wholeness, within the one.
Yes.
So Ukumbuzi, could you please explain to the reader and to us what this means?
Yes, yes. The term Ukombozi is a Swahili term.
Right.
It comes from the Swahili language. Now, the Swahili language is the 10th most spoken language in the world. It is the most spoken language in Africa. So it's the broadest of the tongues in Africa. In the mid-1960s, an outfit which is called the Organization of African Unity, which is now called the African Union, voted that this should become the official language of Africa.
Yes.
So they haven't acted on it, they haven't made it happen, but at least they've voted to say that this is the official language of Africa. And in the official language of Africa, let me make a point before I go on to that actually. When we say the official language of Africa, we're not saying that other language must be dismissed.
Right.
We're saying that there must be a language that everybody in Africa
Unifies
speaks.
Africa. Yes.
Yeah? Not that they disregard their current languages. Current languages must remain. But there must be one language which we all come together on. And so the agreement was that that would be Swahili.
Right.
And in Swahili, the term Ukombozi means liberation.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
The second part of the,
Yes.
of
The objectives.
three-point Pan-African objective.
Right.
Ukombozi,
Ukombozi.
it means liberation.
Okay, so wonderful, which brings us directly back to the objectives and the liberation. So when you're speaking about a language that unifies everybody, we're looking at, mobilization as one of the, as one of the, I'm trying to think, under liberation, mobilization. Talk to us again. So language is one that will mobilize us all together. And then to complete demonstration. So talk about mobilization a bit more, about what brings us together, and then demonstration.
Well, there are examples of great mobilizers in the world. One of the chapters in there talks about Marcus Garvey,
That's right.
a great mobilizer.
Yeah.
Created an organization. In that organization, there were 6 million people, he told us, at the UNI convention in the early 1920s. He told us there were 6 million members.
Yeah.
And in fact, when he came here to Britain on the 6th of June 1928, actually, he spoke in the place that's called the Albert Hall, over there in Hyde Park.
Yes.
And in that speech, he told us that the organization had 11 million people. 11 million. What an act of mobilization.
What an act.
Martin Luther King, a great mobilizer. He would go into cities in the territory where he was, and he would mobilize people.
In the Confederacy States,
His tactic would involve them getting beaten up now.
Yeah.
We're not necessarily involved.
But he went to the heart, didn't he? He went to the heart.
That's right. We don't necessarily favour our people getting beaten up now.
No.
But his mobilizing ability was really
Yes.
exceptional and
Yes.
outstanding.
W.D. Boyce.
Dubois was not a mobilizer in the same way, actually.
Okay.
He was, he was a brilliant mind.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Had some great ideas, but he didn't mobilize in the way that
Okay.
the people I've just mentioned
Oh, right.
actually did. So the Pan-African
interesting.
congresses that he created were not mass meetings. Garvey, for instance,
Yeah.
when they had a convention of the UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, which is the name of the organization that Garvey created.
Yes.
When they had a convention, 25,000 people would attend the convention.
Yeah.
When Dubois held a congress, it would be 2, maybe 300 people.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. So we're
okay.
talking about different scales
Yes,
of
yes.
of mobilization. Yeah. But mobilization. In fact, we can go back further. Demonstration.
Yes.
And if we look at Martin Luther King,
Yes.
we see demonstration,
Yes.
which is part of the process of mobilization.
Yes.
Yeah. So he's mobilizing people to demonstrate, for a just cause.
Yes.
Yeah. The next stage after mobilization is organization.
Organization.
To get people not just to stand up and protest, but to actually do in a constructive way.
Yeah.
In an organization which is structured. You mentioned structure
Yes,
as
yes,
well.
yes.
A structured organization where each person has their role.
Yes.
So when women play netball, for instance, you don't have 7 players on the pitch just doing what they like. You have particular members of the team in particular zones. Some members of the team can't go into another zone. The goal defense can't go up to the front. They've got roles that they've got to play. The center knits everything together. For instance. So organization requires structure. It requires particular roles, and it requires the people in those roles to actually perform those roles to a high standard. To a very, very high standard.
So when we consider, for example, the death of George Floyd, it has brought the nation out. The nation has come out, outpouring of, enough. Enough is enough. This is a time now that we need to be talking about organization.
Yes.
Yes? So relating it to the here and now times, what, in your opinion, give us an idea in from your experience, what we ideally need to be doing now as a nation. For example, the 7th of July, we're all coming out economically, showing our power, not spending any money. So tell me.
Well, can I just interrupt
go
you?
ahead,
There has actually been a lot of people organising different things.
Okay.
I think it was the 26th of June. I think it was, or the 25th. They had Black Pound Day.
Yeah. That's right.
That which went really well.
That week?
Yeah, and then a few days after there's a campaign called Stop the Silence, where they had a fundraiser with all different artists, comedians and stuff coming together, and they raised £5,000 for families that have been struggling during the lockdown in Gambia, Ghana. There was another. There was somewhere else, I can't remember. Another African state as well. So there have been people in the communities actually coming together. I guess it's just about organising better, isn't it? Would you say, on a larger scale?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those are some brilliant examples that you've shared. Some actual brilliant examples.
Absolutely.
So what we see is the mobilisation, the coming out onto the street. And I want to say how proud I am of our children. Yeah, our children came out onto the streets. Yeah, our children were actually very well behaved.
Yes.
Yeah, they were very, very well behaved when they came out on the streets. And I saw some incredible things. I saw our children walking with racists on their shoulders to bring them to safety, for instance.
That's right.
Yeah, this is humanism.
Yes.
This is the humanism we have in us as African people.
Yeah.
Now, we could have killed that man.
Yeah, but they understand the need not to manipulate.
Exactly.
They get it.
Exactly.
They're having that consciousness now.
I've seen many things over the past, few weeks that give me a great source of pride and a great source of hope. Now, one of the problems that we've had in this country is Europeans in denial of their racism. I'm not racist. My best friend is African, or etc. etc.
What's the new term? Unconscious bias now?
Just madness.
Yeah.
But what we have is a new generation of children, and this generation are showing great promise. So the European children are now beginning to recognize their racism and are now trying to do something about it. This is great hope.
Yeah.
This brings
And the
great
melting
hope
pot
for the
is getting
future.
larger and larger. You know, mixed race children are becoming more the significant other now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we are getting, yeah, like you said, we're getting there.
But when you say mixed race children, that's such a broad statement,
Okay,
because I was speaking to someone about this the other day,
Okay.
and you know, to be mixed race, there are so many mixes of different races. It's not any longer just black and white.
No,
Do you know what I mean?
no.
There's so many different
Yeah,
mixes.
yeah.
So
Ethnic mixes,
yeah,
yeah.
and then I mean, you would actually find, if you go back over time, genetically, a lot of people are mixed race. My mum's a black woman, but if you
exactly.
go back, her great grandmother, was a Scottish woman. Do you know what I mean? So, in some
Absolutely.
form or
No,
another,
absolutely,
as much as
absolutely.
we are all
Yeah.
from Africa, there's
No, absolutely. And it
mix
was
in
much
there.
more covert then. But now people are saying, you know, we've mixed heritage in different places. But, you know, back in the day, they weren't acknowledging that sort of thing. But anyway, let's come back, because there's so much of it. The last of the objectives is just system, where we speak about class, ownership, democracy, leadership, sovereignty, and government. So this is about the organised politics again. So would you like to talk us through that before we kind of, close? But go ahead.
Well, we actually touched on it at the beginning.
Yes, we did.
Because you asked the question about women being in charge
Yeah.
of the state.
Yes.
And when we're talking about politics at this level, we're actually talking about who is in charge
Yep.
of the state. And we've identified, from the philosophical position that I come from, that it is best for women to be in charge. And the other thing about women being in charge is very important, because women are more open to allowing others in, to bringing others in, to pulling their talents. Remember, the women are the mothers
Yes, that's right.
of the men.
That's right.
The women are the girlfriends and wives of the men. And women hold the secrets. Women know what men are really like. Yeah? Which men speak truth, which men lie. Because the women know which men lie to them
Yes.
in secret circumstance.
Right.
So women are in a position to select the men who have shown themselves
Yeah.
to be honest
Yes.
in their conduct in life in general, because the women know, and the women talk to each other, and they know who's who among the men. Yeah, and so they can agree which men to bring forward
Wonderful.
to be part of governance.
Community perspective. I love it.
Women will not be selfish
Yeah.
in this area. They never have been selfish in this area. Women have never been trying to get power for themselves. Men have, yeah, but women have never been trying to get power for themselves.
That's
and
the balance.
and get the men out get out of the equation. That hasn't been a trait of women. So,
Yeah.
so at that level, we were already speaking, to the
Yes,
question,
yes, to the
that,
question, yeah.
that you've actually
the beginning,
you've just
yeah.
asked.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you for that. So just to reiterate for the reader, we've gone through the values. Thank you. And we've also talked about the objectives via unity, liberation, and just system. So just to conclude, like I said, this book has so much information, so much material. It was a very interesting read. So I'm just going to pluck from the end of the book in closing, something that I thought, wow, yes. So I'll ask you to elaborate on this for me. African people will abolish slavery forever.
Yes.
So in closing,
absolutely.
please, can you elaborate on that for me?
Yes, and we will. Slavery has its origin in the enslavement of women. It's not a racial issue at all.
Okay.
Yeah, the first slaves on earth were women when men enslaved them. This is the origin of slavery. And the way that it happened, there isn't time for me to give a full explanation.
No,
but let me just very quickly explain.
Right.
Yeah, that there was a period in history when it was difficult for us to sustain ourselves.
Right.
This is called communalism. Yeah, where we all lived together, we all mucked in, and we all tried to grow as much food as we can. We weren't very good at it, and we didn't always have enough food. But eventually, we started to improve, and we started to learn how to look after crops, etc. And we started to get better. And there came a point at which we started to become so good at it that we grew more than we could eat.
Right.
Yeah. So we had surplus. We learned how to farm animals,
Right.
etc.
Yeah.
So we had surplus now.
Going to master. Yeah.
So then the issue becomes, what do you do with the surplus?
excess.
Everybody was involved in creating it. Yeah. What do you do with that surplus?
Yeah.
Well, basically what happened is some of the men decided that they wanted it for themselves. And the way that they operated is that, they got the big strong men to beat up anybody who disagreed
Yes.
that it was theirs.
Wow.
Yeah. Now women, this was men arguing amongst themselves about
Yes.
who's going to have the surplus, but the women did not bother with the fight. Yeah. The women were too busy looking after their families, making sure the children were okay, etc., etc. Making sure the men were okay, etc., etc. So they freely stepped away from that battle. Yeah. And the men who won that battle, in essence, what we have ruling the world are their descendants to this day. But the men who won that battle then took charge not only of the surplus, but the other people. And women were among the other people. So they effectively enslaved, this was the beginning of slavery now, they enslaved the rest of the people in their tribe or in their in their locality. And so what we have is a situation where women were the first slaves, along with some of the men, the defeated men, but women en masse were the first slaves,
Right.
because they just didn't partake in the nonsense. They refused to be a part of the nonsense, and they understood that they had more important things to do, the rearing of the family, whilst the men were folding fists and doing whatever it is that
Do you see how we
they
can
do.
just go on and on and on? So, and we really can. So let's talk more about what the readers are now going to get from it. So I think it's evident what the messages were that you wanted to convey. And please, please, please get a copy of this book. It really tells you all you need to understand about Pan-Africanism, and it tells you how to become self-sufficient, to mobilize and come together as a peoples. So I think it's quite evident what the messages are. So in terms of inspiration, do you want to talk a little bit about, what it is that you wanted to inspire in people?
Can I just talk a little about the structure
Please
of the book?
do, please do, please do.
I mean, the way that the book is written, it is the beginning of the book is really the economics, if you like. Strategy is the doing. It facilitates the doing, and the
Yes.
doing is the economics. Yeah. So the first part of the book is strategy, and so it outlines vision.
Yes.
It outlines a kind of template strategy for people here in Britain.
Yes.
But then
Objectives.
it looks at the strategy of some of our greats. The strategy of Marcus Garvey, the strategy of Kwame Nkrumah,
Yes.
the strategy of Malcolm X.
Malcolm X, yeah.
Those are laid out in that book,
It is.
so that people can have an understanding of what it is that made these people great contributors to the African liberation process.
Right.
And then it goes on to start looking more into the politics. And it looks into the politics of class, but not just class, it's race and class. And it explains the dynamic that different groups of African people find themselves in, and the relationship that African people have, particularly with Europeans, but other people in the world. It then goes on to talk about revolution,
Right.
and helping people to understand what revolution actually is. And when you have a revolution, what it does is it takes you, in this period of history, it will take us from the capitalist form of existence through to the socialist form of existence. So the
Yes.
next chapter looks at socialism,
Yes.
scientific socialism, and explains what scientific socialism is.
Yes.
Most people don't even know what these things are.
That was a question I was going to ask you, if you could just, from the very beginning,
Right, okay.
can you give a brief explanation of what that is?
Okay, do you want me to do that now, or do you want me to finish that
No,
off
that's
and then
fine.
do it? Yeah?
Well,
Yeah?
in whichever order you think is best.
Oh, okay, let me come to your question afterwards and just finish off to maintain the
Yes.
flow, if that's okay.
For the reader, yeah.
So we've reached a point of scientific socialism.
Right.
Yeah, that's politics. The capitalism, the revolution, the socialism.
Yes.
Those are politics. Different types of politics. One is the means of what getting from one politics to the other. Yeah, and then it looks at ideology, and ideology really is about our principles.
Yeah.
You remember, it's the way we treat
right,
each
each
other.
other.
It's the way that we treat people. So it
Yes.
explains in more detail what ideology is. It identifies the cardinal principles of the two competing ideologies in the world. One of them we've just looked at, humanism and exploitation.
Yes.
I won't go much any deeper than that.
Yeah. People buy
At
the
this
book.
stage, yeah, yeah. And then the final chapter. In fact, you were looking in ideology as a chapter
Yes.
after that.
That's
The
right.
final chapter looks at philosophy.
Yes.
So it looks at the relationship between the scientific approach to managing the world
Right.
and the mystical approach to to managing
Spiritualism, yeah.
and running the world.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
so that people, we hope, will have a clearer understanding of all of these processes that we usually take for granted. Yeah, all of these processes that we usually take for granted. If we know what they are, we're at the starting line to be able to involve ourselves in the
Absolutely.
discussions,
Absolutely.
to be able to
True.
strategize clearly
Yes.
rather than guessing. Yeah, to be able to strategize clearly and to identify clearly what it is that we're trying to achieve
Yeah.
in order,
Yes.
to strategize clearly. And this is why the first thing in the book is the vision.
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's about what do we want, and it's an attempt to lay out
Right.
what we want.
Wonderful.
Now, yes. So coming to your question, very simply, what is scientific socialism? Socialism is four things in essence. You remember I outlined the economics, the politics, the ideology, and the philosophy. Yeah. Philosophically, there are two schools of philosophy.
thought, yeah.
Philosophy boils down to two approaches. Yeah. One is called materialists. The other one is called idealist.
Idealist,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's the essence
Yeah.
of philosophy. There are lots of complications in there as you're learning it, but that is the essence of philosophy. Yeah, the materialists work with material as their starting point. Some material says only material exists. Yeah, the idealists work with the non-material. Yeah, some people would say spirit. Yeah. As their starting point. And some people say only spirit exists, that nothing that we see around us is real. And there are a range of philosophical schools in between.
yeah.
But those are the two kind of opposing
Right.
philosophies. There are only
Yes,
two
factions,
philosophies
yeah.
and lots of different shades of philosophy in them. Now, socialism is the materialist philosophy.
Okay.
Yeah, it says, and the way that we practice it in Africa, or practice that philosophy in Africa, is we say that we start with the material in order to get to the spirit.
Right.
So we accept that there's material, we accept that there's spirit, but in order to understand spirit, we must work with.
Yes.
We must work
Towards
with,
enlightenment.
make sense of what we're in, yeah, in order to make
Wow.
sense of spirit. So the first thing is a materialist philosophy. The second thing, and I don't have to spend long on this because you've asked me this question already.
Yeah.
Yeah, At the ideological level,
Yes.
it is humanism.
Yes.
That people are the number one
Relationship. Yeah.
priority.
Yes.
Yeah. So another way to look at philosophy is: do we respect or do we disrespect nature? Yeah. African culture says we respect nature. Scientific socialism says we respect nature. Yeah. The ideological level is: do we respect people or do we disrespect people?
That's a question we can ask ourselves now, isn't
Sorry,
it?
so where does the science part come in?
Okay. The science, if you respect nature, you have nature as your starting point.
Yes. To explore.
So, so the way to interrogate nature is to use science.
Investigate. Yeah.
The interrogation of nature is scientific. Yeah.
In nature,
So
yes.
Is it?
we can do
In
things. We
nature.
can examine the air, for instance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about exploration. Isn't it?
Yeah. It's through well, science is a combination of experimentation,
Yes.
for instance. Yeah. Observation. These are techniques of science.
Yeah.
Yeah. In African culture, we're even more sophisticated because we use some of the what people would think of as idealist techniques.
Spirit.
Yeah? So we have meditation, for instance. But you notice when you meditate, the first thing, if you do meditate, the first thing you have to do is fix your posture.
Yes.
Get your breathing right.
Yes. That's
Because you've got to get the physical in a state
optimum state.
to
isn't it?
be able
Yeah.
to make that spiritual
Be a
engagement.
conduit. Yeah.
So African and scientific socialism as practiced, from an African vantage point, recognizes the material as the base from which to make the connection with spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the third thing that we need comes to the political level. Yeah, and at the political level, in essence, what you need is a united state. Yeah, a unified state which is controlled not by a few elites, not by a few people who are lords over everybody else,
That's
but
a
controlled
democracy,
by the
isn't it?
masses
Yeah, it's a
of the
democracy, yeah.
people.
Yeah.
So it's got to be united, but united under the control of the people.
Yes.
And the fourth part of scientific socialism is industrialization.
Yes.
So we must be able to produce and produce efficiently. Well, what are the most efficient ways of producing that we have in the world? Well, for the last 150 years, that has been through industrialization. Now, industrialization may sound a bit scary, yeah, because it's polluted the world as well.
Yeah.
But that is because the people who have controlled industrialization have no respect for the earth.
Wow.
They have no respect for people. So they will not create new technologies that respect the earth, that respect people. When we introduce these technologies, when we take a leading role in technological development, our respect for nature, will cause us to not produce anything, not produce a motor car that's going to disrupt the planet. But if we want vehicles to travel in, we will tell our engineers to produce the kind of vehicles that allow us to travel, maybe using water or something.
And can you see, Amawale, how we can talk about this forever and a day? We could be here all night. So I'm going to have to bring it to a close. And just thank you so much for coming.
Merci autant.
Prolific, thank you. So again, reader, very interesting book. There are how many in the series? 3?
Well, I mean, I've written 11 books in total.
Wow.
In fact,
Wow.
what have I got here?
We have a few.
Yeah.
But the Battlefront.
There are a number of books here.
Right, okay.
I'm in the process of finishing off a book on Garvey, Marcus Garvey.
Okay.
I've got a book almost finished on Malcolm X, for instance. There's another Pan-African book with the Pan-African title.
So where will people find this information? Tell us, in closing, where will people find this information?
If you type my name, Omowale Rupatemru,
Okay.
and it's spelt as it's spelt on there.
Right,
If you
okay.
type my name, Omowale Rupotemu,
Right.
just onto the internet,
Right.
it should take you straight to the book. If you go on somewhere like
Wonderful.
Amazon, for instance, if you
Wonderful.
go on there and just type my name, you should get a full list of
Wonderful.
the books that are so far published. There are more to
Thank
come.
you.
but
Thank
should
you
should
so,
get them.
so much. And again, I know that we will definitely have you on again, myself and
thank
Prolific.
you.
We will have
Thank
you
you.
back to talk maybe about the battlefront this time so we can identify who, the enemy is
Yes.
moving forward.
Absolutely.
Thank you and
Thank
good
you.
evening. Thank you, reader. I hope that you learnt a lot tonight. I hope that you're able to get a copy of this book and other books in the series. I hope that you're able to learn from it, and you know where to get the books now. Thank you and good evening.